Elena Wright was standing alone in her kitchen when the phone rang. The clock above the stove read 6:12 a.m., the hour when the world was quiet enough to hear your own regrets breathe. Outside, a pale gray fog clung to the street like a secret that didn't want to be told. Elena wrapped both hands around her mug of coffee, already cold, already bitter. She hadn't noticed when it happened. Some mornings just passed her by now. Since retiring from the city archives, silence had become her loudest companion. The phone vibrated again on the counter. Daniel. Her son's name glowed on the screen like a warning she didn't know how to read. Elena stared at it longer than she should have. Her fingers trembled and she hated herself for that most of all. A mother shouldn't shake when her child calls. "Hello," she finally said. "Mom." Daniel's voice sounded polished, distant. There was music behind him, soft jazz, clinking glasses, laughter that didn't belong to her world. Her stomach tightened. "I wanted to tell you myself," he continued. "Before you saw it online." Tell me what?" Elena asked. There was a pause, just long enough to hurt. "Vanessa and I got married yesterday." The words landed without sound, like snow piling on a roof until it collapses. "Yesterday?" Elena whispered. "Yes, it was spontaneous." He cleared his throat. "Lucinda and Richard insisted we keep it very intimate. Elegant, you know how they are." Elena's eyes drifted to the calendar hanging near the fridge. A date circled in blue ink, one Daniel had mentioned months ago, still tentative, he'd said. She had already bought a dress for that day, navy silk, simple, respectable, it was still hanging in her closet. "Oh," she said quietly, "I see. We didn't think it would be your kind of setting," Daniel added quickly. The Hales wanted a very specific atmosphere. High-end, cohesive. The word echoed in Elena's chest like a crack spreading through glass. She thought of the years she worked double shifts, of winters spent in worn coats so Daniel could have better shoes, better schools, better chances. She thought of the night she held him until sunrise after his father died, promising him he would never face the world alone. And now she didn't fit the atmosphere. "Vanessa is very happy," Daniel said, almost defensively. "That's what matters." "I'm sure she is," Elena replied. Another pause, then his tone shifted, gentler, practiced. "There's something else," he said, "a small issue with the wedding expenses." Elena closed her eyes. "The venue needs final payment today," he continued. 65,000. Lucinda's accounts are temporarily tied up, nothing serious, just paperwork." She didn't respond. "I told Vanessa not to worry," Daniel said. "I told her my mother would help, just until everything clears." Elena felt something inside her go very still. "You want me to pay?" she said. "It's just a loan," he rushed. "I emailed you the invoice. You can wire it from your retirement account, right? We're about to leave for our honeymoon. It would mean everything, Mom. Everything, except her dignity, except her future, except her place in his life." "I'll look at it," Elena said. "Thank you," Daniel replied, relief flooding his voice. "I knew I could count on you." The line went dead. Elena stood in the quiet kitchen, staring at nothing. The fog outside thinned, light breaking through, but it didn't feel like morning. It felt like an ending. And as she opened her email and saw the number staring back at her, Elena Wright realized something she had avoided for years. This wasn't about money. It was about whether a mother's worth had an expiration date. But Elena didn't know yet that paying the bill wouldn't buy her a place in her son's life. It would only erase her completely. Elena didn't open the invoice right away. She closed the laptop and sat at the small wooden table by the window, the same place where she used to help Daniel with spelling words when he was 7. The table still carried faint scratches from pencils pressed too hard, from a boy who wanted everything perfect on the first try. Outside, the fog had lifted just enough to reveal the street. Neighbors were starting their day. Doors opened, cars started. Life moved forward without asking her permission. Inside, Elena felt frozen. She finally stood and walked to her bedroom closet. The navy silk dress hung there, still wrapped in clear plastic, untouched. She slid her fingers along the fabric through the cover, remembering the careful way she'd chosen it. Not too flashy, not too plain. Something that said, "I belong, but I won't embarrass you." She let out a slow breath and laughed under it, short, bitter. "I didn't belong," she murmured. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Daniel. "Daniel, did you see the email? The planner is getting impatient. Please handle it before noon." "No, are you okay?" "No, I'm sorry. Just urgency." Elena returned to the kitchen and opened her laptop. The invoice loaded slowly, as if even the computer hesitated to deliver the insult. Total due, $65,000. The breakdown was immaculate. Thousands for flowers. Thousands for imported champagne. thousands for a five-course meal she hadn't tasted, at a table she hadn't sat at, celebrating a union she'd only learned about after it happened. She scrolled down to the payment instructions. Wire transfer only. Her retirement account balance sat open in another tab. $68,900. The number stared back at her like a quiet dare. If she paid, she would have less than $4,000 left. $4,000 for emergencies, for aging bones, for medical bills, for a future where she might need help, and the son asking her for money today wouldn't answer tomorrow. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. Her mind drifted to the engagement party 6 months earlier, the Hale estate, the towering glass walls, the way Lucinda Hale had smiled while guiding Eleanor to a small table near the kitchen. "It's calmer back here," Lucinda had said sweetly. "You'll be more comfortable out of sight." Eleanor had watched her son from that corner, laughing among men in tailored suits, clinking glasses with people who never asked her name. He looked over once, just once, then quickly turned away. She had told herself it was nothing. She had told herself ambition required distance. She had told herself mothers were meant to fade quietly. Her phone rang. This time it was Daniel. "Right," a polished male voice said. "This is Marcus Lane from Lane and Ivory Events. I'm following up regarding the outstanding balance for Daniel and Vanessa's wedding." Eleanor swallowed. "Yes, we were informed you'd be handling payment today," Marcus continued smoothly. "The venue is requiring confirmation within the hour." "Why am I listed as responsible?" Eleanor asked. A pause, papers shuffled. "Your son identified you as the guarantor," Marcus replied. "He said you were very supportive." "Supportive? I wasn't invited," Eleanor said softly. There was another pause, longer this time. "I see," Marcus said carefully. "Well, regardless, the balance remains due." After the call ended, Eleanor sat perfectly still. She thought of Daniel at 12 asking for a suit she couldn't afford. She remembered the diner job, the aching feet, the pride in his eyes when he'd thanked her. That boy would never have done this. She stood, walked to the sink, and poured her untouched coffee down the drain. It spiraled away, dark and final. Her phone buzzed again. "Daniel, Mom, did you send it? We're boarding soon." Eleanor looked around her quiet kitchen, the worn counters, the sturdy walls built from decades of sacrifice. She realized something then, with painful clarity. She wasn't being asked to help. She was being asked to disappear. And for the first time in her life, Eleanor Wright wondered what would happen if she didn't. Eleanor didn't know it yet, but the choice she was about to make wouldn't just change her relationship with her son, it would expose a truth the Hales were desperate to keep hidden. Eleanor sat at her desk long after the phone stopped buzzing. The house felt different now, not empty but watchful, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see what she would do next. She opened the retirement account again, staring at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves into a kinder truth. They didn't. $65,000 wasn't just money, it was heat in winter, medication she might one day need, the promise she had made to herself after her husband died that she would never become a burden to her son. And yet here she was being asked to become his solution. Her phone rang again. "Daniel," she let it ring twice before answering. "Mom," he said, breathless. Airport noise crackled behind his voice. "Marcus just called me. He said you haven't confirmed the wire yet. What's going on?" "I'm thinking," Eleanor replied. "Thinking," his tone sharpened. "There's nothing to think about, the bill has to be paid." "I wasn't invited to the wedding, Daniel," a beat of silence. "We've been over this," he said. "It wasn't personal." "Then why am I paying for it?" she asked. His exhale was loud, irritated. "Because family helps family, that's what you always taught me." The words landed hard. Family helps family, unless family doesn't fit the image, unless family embarrasses the brand. "I need you to understand something," Daniel continued. "Lucinda and Richard have expectations. They move in certain circles. If this bill isn't settled today, it reflects badly on me, on Vanessa." "So my survival reflects worse than your reputation?" Eleanor asked. "Don't be dramatic," he snapped. "You're fine, you have a house, you have a pension, this money is just sitting there." Just sitting there. Eleanor closed her eyes. She pictured herself 10 years from now, older, weaker, calling a son who had already proven how disposable she was. "Daniel," she said slowly, "do you know how much I have left if I pay this?" There was a pause, not concern, calculation. "You don't need much," he said. "You're good at living simply." The sentence shattered something inside her. She realized then that this wasn't desperation. It was entitlement polished into confidence. "You promised," Daniel added, his voice turning cold. "You said you'd look at the invoice." "I did," Eleanor replied. "Every line. And I saw my life priced out for people who don't even know my name." He laughed, sharp and humorless. You're making this about yourself again. Again. I need you to send the money, he said. Now Vanessa is crying, Lucinda is furious. Do you want my marriage to start with humiliation? Alina pictured Vanessa crying not over Alina but over appearances, over cracked illusions. Daniel, she said quietly, when did I stop mattering to you? His silence was answer enough. I can't do this, Alina said. What? His voice rose. You can, you just won't. No, she corrected, I won't. The airport noise swallowed his next words before they came back sharper, louder. You're being selfish, the word burned. After everything I've done, she whispered. Yes, he said without hesitation. After everything, you're choosing money over your own son. Alina felt a strange calm wash over her. No, she said, I'm choosing myself for the first time. Then don't expect to hear from me again, Daniel hissed. You've made your choice. The call ended. Alina sat there, hands trembling not with fear but with something close to relief. She stood and walked to the bedroom. The navy dress still lay where she'd left it, folded neatly. She lifted it, feeling the soft weight of silk, then placed it carefully into a cardboard box. Someone else would wear it. Someone who was wanted. Back in the kitchen, her phone buzzed again, this time from an unfamiliar number. Lucinda Hale, Alina, we need to speak immediately. There's been a misunderstanding about the finances. Alina stared at the message, a misunderstanding. She felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt before, not guilt, not fear, curiosity. She typed nothing back. Instead, she turned off her phone, sat down at her desk, and opened a fresh notebook. For 40 years, she had organized other people's stories. Now she wanted to understand the one unfolding in front of her, especially why a family so elite couldn't pay for its own wedding. Because Alina was about to discover that the Hale family's wealth wasn't just exaggerated, it was an illusion on the verge of collapse. Alina slept poorly that night. Not because of fear, but because memories kept surfacing, one after another, demanding to be seen. The kind of memories she had packed away for years under responsibility and routine. At dawn, she made tea and sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in an old sweater. The house creaked softly, as if stretching awake with her. She opened the notebook she had taken out the night before and wrote a single question at the top of the page. When did my love become leverage? Her mind drifted back 20 years. Daniel was 13, standing in the same kitchen, holding a flyer for a school gala. He needed a suit. A real one, not borrowed, not second-hand. She remembered nodding without hesitation, even though her bank account had barely enough for groceries. She remembered working extra hours at the archives, then taking a weekend cleaning job at a diner she hated. She remembered the smell of grease that never quite washed out of her hands. And she remembered Daniel's face when he wore that suit, how proud he looked. How loved. That boy had believed she was priceless. The man he'd become had priced her at $65,000. The kettle whistled sharply, pulling her back to the present. Alina poured the water and sat again, her thoughts turning colder, clearer. She turned her phone back on. Messages flooded in. Daniel, Marcus Lane, Lucinda Hale 3 times. One message stood out. Lucinda Hale, Alina, this situation is becoming extremely embarrassing. I suggest we discuss this like adults. Embarrassing. Alina smiled faintly. Word no longer had power over her. She opened her laptop, not to look at her bank account but to search. Years of archival work had trained her instincts. Certain details didn't sit right. Families with status didn't ask widows to fund their weddings. Wealth didn't panic over invoices. She typed in Richard Hale, then Hale Holdings. What she found wasn't dramatic at first, just patterns. Shell companies. Properties listed then quietly transferred. A lawsuit here. A settled dispute there. The deeper she went, the clearer it became. The wealth was loud. The stability was non-existent. Alina leaned back, heart steady. This wasn't revenge, it was recognition. Her phone rang. Lucinda, Alina answered. Alina, Lucinda said tightly. I'm glad you picked up. There's been unnecessary tension. On whose part? Alina asked, a pause. This is about family unity, Lucinda said. Daniel is under a lot of pressure, you should understand that. I understand pressure, Alina replied. I lived with it for decades. Lucinda ignored that. The venue is threatening legal action. That would be catastrophic for Daniel's reputation. My reputation never mattered, Alina said calmly. That's not fair, Lucinda snapped. You were always accommodated. Alina pictured the small table near the kitchen, the quiet erasure. Lucinda, she said, why can't you pay the bill? Silence. Then a careful laugh. That's not your concern. It became my concern when your son-in-law asked for my retirement. Another pause, longer this time. Come to Bellevue this afternoon, Lucinda said. Richard and I will explain everything. We can find a solution. Alina looked around her home, the honest where, the unpretentious truth of it. Fine, she said, but understand something. Yes, I'm not coming to be managed. The line went dead. Alina didn't feel nervous as she hung up. She felt prepared. She called an old friend next, Harold Finch, a retired forensic accountant who had spent years buried in public records and financial puzzles. Harold, she said when he answered, I think my son married into a lie. There was a pause, then a quiet chuckle. Those are the most interesting kinds, he said. When do we start? Alina closed her notebook and stood. She walked to the bedroom and opened the box with the navy dress. She took it out slowly. This time she didn't see rejection in it. She saw armor, because whatever waited in Bellevue wasn't about money anymore. It was about truth, and she had spent a lifetime learning how to find it. But Alina had no idea that the meeting in Bellevue wouldn't just expose the Hale family, it would force her son to choose between illusion and reality. Bellevue was everything Alina expected it to be: glass walls, marble floors, the kind of place where silence felt expensive. She arrived 10 minutes early and watched well-dressed patrons glide past her as if they'd rehearsed the movement their entire lives. Lucinda Hale was already seated when Alina entered the private dining room. Richard Hale stood near the window, his back turned, phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call the moment Alina stepped inside. Alina, Lucinda said, rising just enough to be polite. Thank you for coming. Alina nodded and sat. No small talk, no apologies. Richard took his seat last. He didn't smile. We're in an unfortunate position, Lucinda began, folding her napkin carefully, and Daniel's refusal to intervene has made it worse. Daniel didn't refuse, Alina said calmly. He demanded. I declined. Lucinda's lips tightened. We assumed you would understand the importance of appearances. Alina met her gaze. Appearances don't keep people warm at night. Richard cleared his throat. This isn't about philosophy, it's about damage control. And whose damage? Alina asked. Neither answered. Alina leaned back slightly. You asked me here to explain. I'm listening. Lucinda sighed theatrically. The short version is this: some of our assets are temporarily inaccessible, investments tied up overseas, legal complications. Meaning you don't have the cash, Alina said. Meaning, Richard snapped, that we expected family to step in. Alina raised an eyebrow. Family steps in when family is treated like family. Lucinda's composure cracked. You were treated appropriately. Alina smiled, small, sad, appropriately hidden. Richard slammed his palm on the table. This isn't productive. No, Alina agreed, but it is honest. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. Richard stiffened. I spent 40 years working in archives, Alina said. Patterns don't lie. Your companies are structured to look substantial. They aren't. Lucinda's face drained of color. You're leveraged beyond safety, Alina continued. Your properties are mortgaged to the ceiling, and if this invoice goes unpaid, creditors will start asking questions. Silence filled the room like smoke. You had no right, Lucinda whispered. I had every right, Alina replied. You tried to take my future. Richard leaned forward. What do you want? The question hung heavy. Alina didn't answer immediately. She thought of Daniel, how far he had drifted, how willingly he had learned to measure worth in shine and status. I want my son protected, she said finally. From your debts, from your lies. Lucinda laughed bitterly. Daniel married into this willingly. No, Alina said. He married into an image you sold him. Richard scoffed. And what are you going to do? Expose us? Alina folded her hands. No, I'm going to offer you something better. Lucinda's eyes narrowed. Which is separation, Alina said. You will assume full responsibility for the wedding debt. Daniel will not be listed as guarantor. His name stays clean. Richard hesitated. And in return, you will stop contacting me, stop asking for money, and you will tell Daniel the truth. Lucinda shook her head. He'll hate you. He already does, Alina said quietly, for reasons that have nothing to do with me. Richard leaned back, calculating. And if we refuse, Alina met his gaze evenly. Then my friend Harold Finch and I continue documenting what we found, publicly. Lucinda inhaled sharply. Richard exhaled. You're bluffing, Alina stood. I've spent my life being underestimated. I'm done correcting people. She turned to leave. Wait, Lucinda said urgently. If we agree, you'll stay silent. I'll stay truthful, Alina replied. That's the best I can offer. She walked out without looking back. Outside, the city felt louder, realer. Her phone buzzed the moment she reached the sidewalk. Daniel. She stared at the screen, heart heavy. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of what he might say. Because whatever came next, it would be based on truth, not obligation. Alina didn't know whether the Hales would accept her terms, but she knew the real confrontation was still ahead, and it would be with her son. Alina didn't answer Daniel's call right away. She walked 2 blocks before stopping beneath a leafless tree, its branches clawing at the pale sky. Her hands were steady now. Whatever fear she once carried had been burned away in that glass-walled room. When she finally answered, Daniel spoke before she could say hello. "What did you do?" he demanded. Alina closed her eyes. "I told the truth. My in-laws are furious," he said. "Vanessa is beside herself. You humiliated us." "No," Alina replied evenly. "You were already humiliated, I just refused to absorb it for you." "That's not fair," he snapped. "They said you threatened them." "I set boundaries," she said. "You're not used to hearing that from me," Daniel scoffed. "You've always been dramatic." Alina felt the sting, but she didn't retreat. "Daniel," she said, "did you know the Hales couldn't pay for your wedding?" Silence. "You knew, didn't you?" she continued. "At least part of it," he exhaled sharply. "They said it was temporary, they said the money was coming." "And when it did?" Alina asked. "They said family would help." Alina nodded. "So they pointed at me." "They didn't point," he said weakly. "I volunteered you." The words landed heavier than any insult. "You volunteered my future," Alina said softly. "I thought you'd understand," he said. "You always do." "That's the problem," she replied. "You learned that my understanding had no limits." Daniel's voice cracked. "You could have just paid it. This didn't have to become a war." "Wars happen when people refuse to be invisible," Alina said. "You don't get it," he snapped. "Vanessa's family has influence, connections. This marriage matters." "And so do you," Alina replied. "Which is why I intervened." "Intervened how?" he demanded. Alina took a breath. "I offered them a choice, take responsibility for their debt or face exposure." "What?" His voice dropped. "You can't do that." "I already did." Daniel laughed once hollow. "You've always hated them." "I don't hate them," Alina said. "I see them." "That's worse," he muttered. Alina softened her tone. "Daniel, listen to me. I didn't do this to punish you. I did it to protect you." "From what?" he asked. "From being tied to financial instability you don't understand yet. From waking up one day responsible for debts you never agreed to." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "They told me they were solid," he said finally. "They said you were overreacting." "They needed you to believe that," Alina replied, "because belief is cheaper than truth." "So what now?" he asked. Alina looked down the street, watching strangers pass. "Now you decide what kind of man you want to be." "You're asking me to choose," he said. "I'm asking you to see," she corrected. "Choosing comes after," Daniel swallowed. "Vanessa says you're trying to control us." "I'm letting go," Alina said. "That's what scares her." Another silence. "Mom," he said quietly, "what if you're wrong?" Alina didn't hesitate. "Then I lose the last illusion I had about being needed." Daniel's breath hitched. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "I know," Alina replied. "You just didn't mean not to." The line went quiet. When the call ended, Alina felt the weight of years lift slightly from her chest. She had said what needed saying. For once, she hadn't softened it to spare someone else. Her phone chimed again. A message from Lucinda. "Lucinda Hale, we will assume the debt. The payment will be handled. Please confirm that this ends here." Alina stared at the screen, then typed back a single line. "Alina, tell Daniel the truth." She slipped the phone into her coat pocket and continued walking. She didn't know if Daniel would believe her or forgive her. But she knew this: love that demands self-erasure is not love at all. And for the first time since becoming a mother, Alina Wright chose honesty over harmony. What Alina didn't know was that the truth was about to reach Daniel in a way she never expected, and it would shatter everything he thought he'd built. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The hotel room was dark, but his mind wouldn't rest. Vanessa lay beside him, turned away, her breathing shallow and uneven. The quiet between them felt heavier than any argument. Alina's words replayed over and over. "Belief is cheaper than truth." Daniel sat up, rubbing his face. He had wanted this life, the elegance, the access, the assurance that he had finally arrived somewhere that mattered. Vanessa's world promised permanence, prestige, safety, but safety shouldn't feel this fragile. His phone buzzed on the bedside table, a message from his father-in-law. "Richard Hale, we need to talk." Now Daniel's chest tightened. He stepped into the bathroom, closing the door softly, and called back. "Daniel," Richard said without greeting, "your mother has caused significant complications." "What kind of complications?" Daniel asked. Richard hesitated. "Financial." Daniel's stomach dropped. "You told me everything was stable." "It was, until certain accounts were examined," Richard replied. "Examined?" Daniel leaned against the sink. "What does that mean?" "It means," Richard said carefully, "that your mother has connections, ones we underestimated." Daniel felt heat rush to his face. "You said she was overreacting." "She is persistent," Richard corrected, "and persistence invites scrutiny." Daniel's voice shook. Are you saying the money isn't coming? Another pause. We'll cover the wedding expense, Richard said, but that's not the point. What is the point? Daniel demanded. The point, Richard snapped, is that this situation never should have involved her. Daniel laughed bitterly. You involved her. She was convenient, Richard said, accessible, emotionally predictable. Daniel closed his eyes. Predictable. She's my mother, Daniel said quietly. Yes, Richard replied, and that's why you should have managed her. The word hit Daniel like a slap. I trusted you, Daniel said. You said this family stood for integrity, Richard scoffed. Integrity is a luxury. Optics or survival? The line went dead. Daniel stared at his reflection in the mirror. He looked older than he had a week ago. The man staring back at him wasn't powerful, he was cornered. He stepped out of the bathroom. Vanessa was sitting up now, arms crossed. They called you too, she said flatly. Daniel nodded. Your parents lied to me. Vanessa's eyes hardened. They protected us. By using my mother? Daniel asked. She offered, Vanessa snapped. No, he said. I volunteered her. Words tasted like rust. Vanessa stood. You're being dramatic. Every family has skeletons. Skeletons don't ask widows for retirement money, Daniel said, her face flushed. You're choosing her over us. Daniel's chest tightened. Why is it always a choice? Because loyalty matters, she said. So does honesty, he replied. Vanessa turned away. My parents will handle it. Drop this. Daniel thought of Alina, alone in her kitchen, calculating survival while he demanded compliance. No, he said. Vanessa spun back. What did you say? I said no, Daniel repeated. I want the truth, all of it. Her eyes widened. You're going to ruin everything. Maybe, he said, but at least it'll be real. She laughed coldly. You sound just like her. Daniel didn't flinch. Good. The room fell silent. Vanessa grabbed her phone and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. Daniel sank onto the bed, heart pounding. He scrolled to his mother's number, hovering over it. For the first time, he wasn't calling to ask for something. He was calling to listen. But before Daniel could speak to his mother, the truth would come crashing down publicly and far more brutally than Alina had ever intended. The story broke 2 days later, not with a headline but with a whisper that spread too fast to contain. An investor pulled out. A lender followed. By morning, financial blogs were dissecting Hale Holdings with surgical precision. By noon, the whispers were loud. Daniel stood in the lobby of the Hale family offices, phone in hand, scrolling through article after article. Words blurred together, over-leveraged, misrepresented assets, pending audits. Each sentence felt like a crack splitting open the life he thought he'd secured. His phone buzzed. Vanessa, he didn't answer. Inside the boardroom, Lucinda sat rigid, her perfect posture finally failing her. Richard paced like a trapped animal, tie loosened, face gray. This is your mother's doing, Lucinda hissed when Daniel entered. Daniel looked at her calmly. No, this is the consequence of lying. Richard slammed a folder onto the table. She leaked documents. Daniel opened it, his breath caught. These weren't leaks, they were public records, compiled, organized, impossible to deny. She didn't fabricate anything, Daniel said quietly. She orchestrated it, Lucinda snapped. Daniel shook his head. She protected herself. Richard stopped pacing. We can still fix this, but we need unity. Unity built on silence? Daniel asked. Lucinda's eyes burned. You married into this family. I married Vanessa, Daniel said. Not your debt. Silence fell. Lucinda's voice dropped. You owe us loyalty. Daniel felt something inside him harden. I owe my mother an apology, Richard scoffed. Sentiment won't save you. No, Daniel agreed, but truth might. He turned and walked out. Outside, the city buzzed, oblivious, indifferent. Daniel dialed Alina's number, heart pounding. She answered on the second ring. Mom, he said, her voice was calm. Daniel. I'm sorry, he said, the words breaking free at last. I didn't see it, I didn't want to. I know, Alina replied, seeing costs something. They used you, he said, I let them. Yes, she said gently. And now you know better, his voice shook. I don't know what to do. You don't have to decide everything today, Alina said. Just don't lie to yourself. Daniel exhaled. Vanessa says this will destroy her family. It will change them, Alina corrected. Destruction happens when people refuse to change. He swallowed. Will you meet me? Alina paused. Yes, they agreed on a small cafe near the river, neutral ground. When Daniel arrived, Alina was already there, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She looked smaller than he remembered, or maybe he was finally seeing her clearly. I should have invited you, he said, sitting down. Yes, she replied. You should have. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid you wouldn't fit. Alina met his gaze. Fit into what? He had no answer. I forgot who taught me strength, he said quietly. Alina smiled faintly. You didn't forget, you replaced it. They sat in silence, watching the river move steadily forward. I don't know if my marriage will survive this, Daniel said. I hope it survives truth, Eleanor said. If it doesn't, it wasn't built to last. Daniel nodded, tears blurring his vision. Across the city, Hale Holdings' illusion crumbled. But at that small cafe, something real, fragile, honest was finally being rebuilt. Daniel believed the worst was over, but the final reckoning would come not from the Hales, but from a choice he still hadn't made. The silence between Daniel and Vanessa stretched for 3 days. 3 days of unanswered messages. 3 nights of sleeping on opposite edges of the bed, backs turned like strangers who had learned too late they spoke different languages. On the 4th morning, Vanessa broke it. We need to decide how we're handling this, she said, standing by the window of their apartment, arms folded tightly. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, a mug of untouched coffee in front of him. I already decided how I'm handling it. She turned sharply. Meaning, I'm not covering your parents' debts, he said. Not now, not ever. Her expression hardened. Then you're choosing your mother over your wife. Daniel stood. I'm choosing honesty over illusion. Vanessa laughed brittle. You think honesty pays bills? No, he said, but lies collect interest. She stared at him. My family gave you access, introductions, status, and took my integrity in exchange, he replied. Vanessa's voice dropped. You owe them. I owe my mother an apology, Daniel said, and myself a spine. Her eyes flashed. You're sounding ungrateful. No, he said. I'm sounding awake. The words landed heavily between them. Later that day, Daniel met Eleanor again, this time at her house, the same house he'd grown up in, the same quiet strength holding it together. I told Vanessa I won't be their shield, he said. Eleanor nodded. That was never your job. She says love means standing together, he continued. Love means standing honestly, Eleanor replied. Even when it's uncomfortable. Daniel looked around. I used to be embarrassed by this place. Eleanor smiled sadly. I know. I don't know why, he said. It's solid, real. Real doesn't sparkle, Eleanor said. It endures, Daniel swallowed. If I walk away from this marriage, I lose everything I worked for. Eleanor met his eyes. You lose what you worked for if you stay silent. He sat heavily. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Eleanor reached across the table and placed her hand over his. You are, you just forgot because someone else convinced you strength looked different. That evening, Vanessa returned home with her decision already formed. My parents need me, she said. And if you can't stand with them, I can't stand with you. Daniel closed his eyes. So that's it, he asked. She hesitated just a fraction. You're asking me to betray them. No, he said. I'm asking you to stop asking me to betray myself. Her silence was answer enough. Vanessa packed a bag that night. When the door closed behind her, the apartment felt hollow but lighter. Daniel sat on the floor, back against the couch, grief mixing with relief. He called his mother. It's over, he said quietly. Eleanor's voice was gentle. I'm sorry. I'm not, he admitted. I'm sad, but I'm not sorry. That's how you know it was the right choice, Eleanor said. Days later, the legal separation papers arrived. Daniel signed them without shaking. Hale Holdings dissolved quietly under investigation. Lucinda retreated from public view. Richard settled claims behind closed doors. No dramatic courtroom scenes, no grand apologies, just consequences. Daniel moved into a smaller place. Simpler, honest. On his first night there, he called Eleanor. I thought losing them would break me, he said, and, she asked. And it didn't, he replied. Losing you almost did. Eleanor closed her eyes, tears slipping free. I'm here, she said. That never changed. Daniel thought the story was finished, but the final chapter would belong not to him but to the woman he had once overlooked. Eleanor's life didn't change overnight. There was no sudden wealth. No public apology tour. No dramatic victory lap. What changed was quieter and far more powerful. She slept better. Mornings returned to her in small, honest ways, tea instead of coffee, walks by the river, time that felt like it belonged to her again. For the first time in decades, Eleanor wasn't bracing for someone else's crisis. Daniel visited often now, not out of obligation, but intention. He fixed the loose step on her porch one Saturday afternoon, laughing when he realized how long it had been broken. You never told me, he said. I didn't want to bother you, Eleanor replied. He stopped mid-hammer and looked at her. You're not a burden. I know, she said softly. Now, they sat together afterward, watching the sun dip low, painting the street in gold. I used to think being needed meant being loved, Daniel said. Eleanor nodded. Most of us are taught that. And you? He asked. I learned that being respected feels quieter, she said. But it lasts longer, Daniel smiled. I don't think I ever thanked you. For what? For letting me fall without letting me disappear. Eleanor reached over and squeezed his hand. That's what mothers are supposed to do. Weeks later, Elena received a letter not from the Hales, but from a legal firm confirming the closure of any financial exposure tied to Daniel. Clean, final. She placed the letter in her files, then closed the drawer. That chapter no longer needed revisiting. One afternoon, Harold Finch stopped by with pastries and his familiar dry grin. You know, he said, most people would have gone public. Written a book, made noise. Elena shrugged. Noise wasn't the point. What was? Staying whole. Harold nodded, impressed. You did more than that. Daniel arrived later, carrying groceries. I got the job, he said, smiling. Smaller firm, no flashy titles. Eleanor's eyes lit up. Congratulations. They value transparency, he added. Apparently that's rare, she laughed softly. As weeks turned into months, Eleanor donated the navy dress to a local charity. She imagined another woman wearing it on a day she felt chosen. That thought made her smile. On her birthday, Daniel cooked dinner. He burned the vegetables, under-seasoned the soup, and laughed the entire time. I'm still learning, he said. So am I, Eleanor replied. Later that night, Eleanor sat alone with a journal, no longer asking why she wasn't enough. Instead, she wrote, I was never invisible. I was surrounded by people who couldn't see. She closed the book, Content. The world outside continued its endless noise, status, image, ambition, but inside her small, steady life, Eleanor Wright stood exactly where she belonged. Unbowed, unpurchased, unbroken. Sometimes the most powerful ending isn't reconciliation or revenge, it's a woman who finally chooses herself.